There was a man who reshaped an entire city, controlling how millions of people lived, traveled, and moved, without ever being elected to power. His decisions determined which neighborhoods survived and which ones disappeared beneath concrete, highways, and massive urban transformation projects. Yet despite this immense control, most people today barely recognize his name or understand the system he quietly built. This is the story of a man who turned infrastructure into power and used it to reshape one of the largest cities in the world. To understand his influence, we must go back to a time when cities were struggling to modernize and adapt to rapid growth. In the early 20th century, urban areas were expanding quickly, creating new challenges in transportation, housing, and public space planning. Governments sought solutions, but progress was often slow, limited by politics, bureaucracy, and competing interests. Into this environment stepped a figure who believed that change should not wait for approval, but instead be executed with authority. He was not an elected official, yet he held positions that gave him control over critical infrastructure decisions across the city. Through a network of agencies and authorities, he gained influence that extended far beyond what most public figures could achieve. This system allowed him to operate independently, making decisions without the usual political limitations or public accountability. With this power, he began reshaping the city, focusing on large-scale projects that would define its future for decades. Highways were built through neighborhoods, cutting across communities that had existed for generations. Entire areas were cleared, replaced by roads, bridges, and structures designed to support a new vision of urban life. To some, this represented progress, a necessary transformation to bring the city into a modern era of movement and efficiency. But beneath the surface of progress, a different reality was taking shape, one that would leave lasting consequences across the city's social and cultural fabric. Communities that once thrived together found themselves divided by roads that prioritized speed and efficiency over human connection and neighborhood identity. Entire streets disappeared from the map, replaced by structures designed not for people, but for the growing dominance of automobiles. The city was being redesigned not around its residents, but around a vision of movement controlled by infrastructure and centralized planning authority. This transformation gave him unprecedented influence, allowing him to dictate how millions would experience daily life within the city. Bridges rose across waterways, connecting distant regions while reinforcing his control over how people moved between them. Parks and public spaces were constructed, but even these carried his imprint, carefully designed to reflect specific priorities and long-term plans. To supporters, he was a visionary, someone capable of achieving what others could not within a slow and complicated system. To critics, however, he represented something far more concerning, a concentration of power that operated beyond democratic accountability. His authority came not from votes, but from control over funding, planning, and execution of massive infrastructure projects. This allowed him to bypass opposition, pushing forward plans that might otherwise have faced resistance or been completely rejected. Over time, his influence expanded further, reaching into nearly every aspect of urban development across the region. Highways became the defining feature of his legacy, stretching across the city and shaping its future in ways that could not easily be reversed. These roads were designed for efficiency, but often at the cost of disrupting communities that stood in their path. Residents were displaced, forced to relocate as entire neighborhoods were cleared to make way for construction. The impact was not evenly distributed. Some communities were affected far more than others, creating lasting inequalities within the city. This imbalance added to growing criticism, raising questions about who truly benefited from these massive projects. Despite opposition, the system he built remained strong, protected by layers of authority that insulated it from direct political challenge. Decisions continued to be made, often without meaningful input from the people most affected by their consequences. The city continued to transform, becoming increasingly shaped by infrastructure that prioritized movement over community stability. Yet the scale of his work was undeniable. Few individuals had ever left such a visible mark on a city's physical structure. His projects defined the skyline, the roadways, and the very layout of how people navigated urban space. Over time, however, public perception began to shift as the long-term effects of these decisions became more apparent. What once appeared as progress started to reveal deeper consequences tied to displacement and social division.
Newspapers and
Critics became more
increasing
vocal,
rapidly.
challenging not
Coverage
only the
has surged
projects
by over
themselves,
300%
but the
in just
system that
months.
allowed them to happen.
This rapid rise.
Questions about accountability grew louder, focusing on how so much power had been concentrated in a single individual. Investigations and public scrutiny increased, bringing attention to the methods used to maintain control over infrastructure development. Slowly, the system that once seemed unshakable began to face resistance from both the public and political figures. The balance of power started to shift as new voices demanded greater oversight and transparency in decision-making. His influence, while still significant, was no longer absolute as challenges to his authority gained momentum. Projects that once moved forward without resistance now faced delays, opposition, and increasing public debate. The era of unchecked control was beginning to end, replaced by a more contested and scrutinized approach to urban planning. Yet even as his power declined, the infrastructure he created remained deeply embedded within the city. Roads, bridges, and public works continued to shape daily life, long after his direct influence began to fade. The system he built had outlasted him, continuing to operate regardless of changing leadership or shifting political priorities. This persistence revealed something important, that infrastructure, once established, becomes difficult to undo or replace. The city had been permanently altered, its structure reflecting decisions made decades earlier under his direction. For many residents, these changes became normal, part of the environment they navigated every single day. Yet the origins of these systems were often forgotten, lost beneath the routine of everyday urban life. His name slowly faded from public awareness, even as his work remained visible in nearly every corner of the city. This created a strange contrast between the scale of his influence and the limited recognition of his role in shaping it. The story of his control became less discussed, overshadowed by the ongoing function of the systems he left behind. But the impact of his decisions continued, influencing traffic patterns, housing distribution, and access to public spaces. The city itself became a reflection of his vision, structured around movement, efficiency, and centralized planning authority. And yet, that vision was not without cost, leaving behind questions that would persist long after his time had passed. Was the transformation worth the disruption, or did the benefits come at too great a social and cultural expense? These questions remain difficult to answer, as the city continues to rely on the systems he created. The complexity of his legacy cannot be simplified, existing between progress and consequence, innovation and control. It serves as a reminder that large-scale decisions often carry effects that extend far beyond their original intent. Infrastructure shapes behavior, influencing how people move, interact, and experience their environment every day. Once established, these systems guide daily life, often without those using them realizing their origin or purpose. This is what made his influence so powerful, not just what he built, but how deeply it became integrated into the city. The roads and structures became invisible systems, operating in the background of everyday existence. People followed paths defined decades earlier, rarely questioning why the city was arranged the way it was. And in that sense, his control never fully disappeared, it simply became less visible over time. The system continued functioning, shaping behavior without needing direct oversight or continued authority. This is the lasting power of infrastructure, its ability to outlive its creator and continue influencing generations. The city moved forward, adapting to new challenges while still relying on the framework he established. Yet the debates surrounding his legacy persisted, resurfacing whenever new development projects were proposed. His story became a reference point for discussions about power, planning, and the role of public oversight. It highlighted the importance of balance between efficiency and community, progress and preservation. The lessons drawn from his work remain relevant, especially in a world where cities continue to grow and evolve rapidly. As new systems are designed, the question of who controls them becomes increasingly important. Because the structures we build today will shape how future generations live and move within their environments. And those decisions, once implemented, may last far longer than the individuals who created them. This is what makes his story so significant, not just as history, but as a reflection of how power can be exercised. It shows how influence can exist without visibility, embedded within systems that operate silently over time. The city stands as evidence of what can happen when control is concentrated in a single vision. It is both a testament to achievement and a reminder of the consequences that can follow. And as people move through the city today, they are still navigating the paths he created decades ago. Often without realizing it, they are experiencing a system shaped by decisions made long before their time. That system continues to function, guiding movement, shaping space, and influencing daily life in subtle ways. It exists in plain sight, yet its origins remain largely unnoticed by those who rely on it. And that may be the most powerful aspect of all, a legacy that continues without needing recognition or attention. Because sometimes, the systems that control our world are not the ones we see, but the ones we simply learn to live within.